This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 4. The Same to the Same, December 15th. Yesterday at 2 o'clock I went to drive in the Champs-Élysées and the Bois de Boulogne. It was one of those autumn days which we used to find so beautiful on the banks of the Loire. So I have seen Paris at last. The Place Louis XV is certainly very fine, but the beauty is that of man's handiwork. I was dressed to perfection, pensive, with set face, though inwardly much tempted to laugh, under a lovely hat, my arms crossed. Would you believe it? Not a single smile was thrown at me. Not one poor youth was struck motionless as I passed. Not a soul turned to look again. And yet the carriage proceeded with a deliberation worthy of my pose. No, I am wrong. There was one, a duke and a charming man, who suddenly reined in as we went by. The individual who thus saved appearances for me was my father, and he proclaimed himself highly gratified by what he saw. I met my mother also, who sent me a butterfly kiss from the tips of her fingers. The worthy Griffith, who fears no man, cast her glances hither and thither without discrimination. In my judgment, a young woman should always know exactly what her eye is resting on. I was mad with rage. One man actually inspected my carriage without noticing me. This flattering homage probably came from a carriage-maker. I have been quite out in the reckoning of my forces. Plainly, beauty, that rare gift which comes from heaven, is commoner in Paris than I thought. I saw hats doffed with deference to simpering fools. A purple face called forth murmurs of, "It is she." My mother received an immense amount of admiration. There is an answer to this problem, and I mean to find it. The men, my dear, seemed to me generally very ugly. The very few exceptions are bad copies of us. Heaven knows what evil genius has inspired their costume. It is amazingly inelegant compared with those of former generations. It has no distinction, no beauty of color or romance. It appeals neither to the senses, nor the mind, nor the eye. And it must be very uncomfortable. It is meager and stunted. The hat, above all, struck me. It is a sort of truncated column, and does not adapt itself in the least to the shape of the head, but I am told it is easier to bring about a revolution than to invent a graceful hat. Courage in Paris recoils before the thought of appearing in a round felt, and for lack of one day's daring men stick all their lives to this ridiculous headpiece. And yet Frenchmen are said to be fickle. The men are hideous anyway, whatever they put on their heads. I have seen nothing but worn, hard faces, with no calm nor peace in the expression. The harsh lines and furrows speak of foiled ambition and smarting vanity. A fine forehead is rarely seen. "And these are the product of Paris?" I said to Miss Griffith. "Most cultivated and pleasant men," she replied. I was silent. The heart of a spinster of 36 is a well of tolerance. In the evening I went to the ball, where I kept close to my mother's side. She gave me her arm with a devotion which did not miss its reward. All the honors were for her. I was made the pretext for charming compliments. She was clever enough to find me fools for my partners, who one and all expatiated on the heat and the beauty of the ball, till you might suppose I was freezing and blind. Not one failed to enlarge on the strange, unheard-of, extraordinary, odd, remarkable fact that he saw me for the first time. My dress, which dazzled me as I paraded alone in my white and gold drawing-room, was barely noticeable amidst the gorgeous finery of most of the married women. Each had her band of faithful followers, and they all watched each other askance. A few were radiant in triumphant beauty, and amongst these was my mother. A girl at a ball is a mere dancing machine, a thing of no consequence whatever. The men, with rare exceptions, did not impress me more favourably here than at the Champs-Élysées. They have a used-up look, their features are meaningless, or rather they have all the same meaning. The proud, stalwart bearing which we find in the portraits of our ancestors, men who joined moral to physical vigour, has disappeared. Yet in this gathering there was one man of remarkable ability, who stood out from the rest by the beauty of his face. But even he did not rouse in me the feeling which I should have expected. I do not know his works, and he is a man of no family. Whatever the genius and the merits of a plebeian or a commoner, he could never stir my blood. Besides, this man was obviously so much more taken up with himself than with anybody else, that I could not but think these great brain-workers must look on us as things rather than persons. When men of intellectual power love, they ought to give up writing, otherwise their love is not the real thing. The lady of their heart does not come first in all their thoughts. I seemed to read all this in the bearing of the man I speak of. I am told he is a professor, orator, and author, whose ambition makes him the slave of every bigwig. My mind was made up on the spot. It was unworthy of me, I determined, to quarrel with society for not being impressed by my merits, and I gave myself up to the simple pleasure of dancing, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I heard a great deal of inept gossip about people of whom I know nothing, but perhaps it is my ignorance on many subjects which prevents me from appreciating it, as I saw that most men and women took a lively pleasure in certain remarks, whether falling from their own lips or those of others. Society bristles with enigmas which look hard to solve. It is a perfect maze of intrigue, yet I am fairly quick of sight and hearing, and as to my wits, Mademoiselle de Maucombe does not need to be told. I returned home, tired, with a pleasant sort of tiredness, and in all innocence began describing my sensations to my mother, who was with me. She checked me with the warning that I must never say such things to any one but her. "My dear child," she added, "it needs as much tact to know when to be silent as when to speak." This advice brought home to me the nature of the sensations which ought to be concealed from every one, not excepting perhaps even a mother. At a glance I measured the vast field of feminine duplicity. I can assure you, sweetheart, that we, in our unabashed simplicity, would pass for two very wide-awake little scandal-mongers. What lessons may be conveyed in a finger on the lips, in a word, a look? All in a moment I was seized with excessive shyness. What? May I never again speak of the natural pleasure I feel in the exercise of dancing? How then, I said to myself, about the deeper feelings? I went to bed sorrowful, and I still suffer from the shock produced by this first collision of my frank, joyous nature with the harsh laws of society. Already the highway hedges are flecked with my white wool. Farewell, beloved. End of Letter 4. Read by Kara Schallenberg, www.kray.org, on November 2nd, 2006, in Oceanside, California.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, August 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 50. Madame de l'Estorade to Madame de Macumer. Louise, can it be that, with all your knowledge of the deep-seated mischief wrought by the indulgence of passion, even within the heart of marriage, you are planning a life of wedded solitude? Having sacrificed your first husband in the course of a fashionable career, would you now fly to the desert to consume a second? What stores of misery you are laying up for yourself! But I see from the way you have set about it that there is no going back. The man who has overcome your aversion to a second marriage must indeed possess some magic of mind and heart, and you can only be left to your illusions. But have you forgotten your former criticism on young men? Not one, you would say, but has visited haunts of shame, and has besmirched his purity with the filth of the streets. Where is the change, pray, in them or in you? You are a lucky woman to be able to believe in happiness. I have not the courage to blame you for it, though the instinct of affection urges me to dissuade you from this marriage. Yes, 1,000 times yes, it is true that nature and society are at one in making war on absolute happiness, because such a condition is opposed to the laws of both. Possibly also because Heaven is jealous of its privileges. My love for you forebodes some disaster to which all my penetration can give no definite form. I know neither whence nor from whom it will arise. But one need be no prophet to foretell that the mere weight of a boundless happiness will overpower you. Excess of joy is harder to bear than any amount of sorrow. Against him I have not a word to say. You love him, and in all probability I have never seen him. But some idle day I hope you will send me a sketch, however slight, of this rare, fine animal. If you see me so resigned and cheerful, it is because I am convinced that, once the honeymoon is over, you will both with one accord fall back into the common track. Some day, 2 years hence, when we are walking along this famous road, you will exclaim, "Why, there is the chalet which was to be my home for ever!" and you will laugh your dear old laugh, which shows all your pretty teeth. I have said nothing yet to Louis. It would be too good an opening for his ridicule. I shall tell him simply that you are going to be married, and that you wish it be kept secret. Unluckily, you need neither mother nor sister for your bridal evening. We are in October now; like a brave woman, you are grappling with winter first. If it were not a question of marriage, I should say you were taking the bull by the horns. In any case, you will have in me the most discreet and intelligent of friends. That mysterious region, known as the centre of Africa, has swallowed up many travellers, and you seem to me to be launching on an expedition which, in the domain of sentiment, corresponds to those where so many explorers have perished, whether in the sands or at the hands of natives. Your desert is, happily, only 2 leagues from Paris, so I can wish you quite cheerfully a safe journey and speedy return. End of chapter 50. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, September 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 51. The Comtesse de l'Estorade to Madame Marie Gaston, 1835. What has come to you, my dear? After a silence of 2 years, surely Renee has a right to feel anxious about Louise. So this is love. It brushes aside and scatters to the winds a friendship such as ours. You must admit that, devoted as I am to my children, more even perhaps than you to your Gaston, a mother's love has something expansive about it which does not allow it to steal from other affections, or interfere with the claims of friendship. I miss your letters. I long for a sight of your dear sweet face. Oh, Louise, my heart has only conjecture to feed upon. As regards ourselves, I will try and tell you everything as briefly as possible. On reading your last letter but one, I find some stinging comments on our political situation. You mocked at us for keeping the post in the audit department, which, as well as the title of Count, Louis owed to the favor of Charles X. But I should like to know, please, how it would be possible, out of an income of 40,000 livres, 30,000 of which go with the entail, to give a suitable start in life to Athenais and my poor little beggar Renee. Was it not a duty to live on our salary and prudently allow the income of the estate to accumulate? In this way we shall, in 20 years, have put together about 600,000 francs, which will provide portions for my daughter and for Renee, whom I destine for the navy. The poor little chap will have an income of 10,000 livres, and perhaps we may contrive to leave him in cash enough to bring his portion up to the amount of his sister's. When he is captain, my beggar will be able to make a wealthy marriage and take a position in society as good as his elder brothers. These considerations of prudence determined the acceptance in our family of the new order of things. The new dynasty, as was natural, raised Louis to the peerage and made him a grand officer of the Legion of Honor. The oath once taken, l'Estorade could not be half-hearted in his services, and he has since then made himself very useful in the Chamber. The position he has now attained is one in which he can rest upon his oars till the end of his days. He has a good deal of adroitness in business matters, and though he can hardly be called an orator, speaks pleasantly and fluently, which is all that is necessary in politics. His shrewdness and the extent of his information in all matters of government and administration are fully appreciated, and all parties consider him indispensable. I may tell you that he was recently offered an embassy, but I would not let him accept it. I am tied to Paris by the education of Armand and Athenais, who are now respectively 13 and nearly 11, and I don't intend leaving till little René has completed his, which is just beginning. We could not have remained faithful to the elder branch of the dynasty and returned to our country life without allowing the education and prospects of the 3 children to suffer. A mother, my sweet, is hardly called on to be a Decius, especially at a time when the type is rare. In 15 years from now, l'Estorade will be able to retire to La Crampade on a good pension, having found a place as referendary for Armand in the audit department. As for René, the Navy will doubtless make a diplomatist of him. The little rogue, at 7 years old, has all the cunning of an old cardinal. Oh, Louise, I am indeed a happy mother. My children are an endless source of joy to me. Senza brama sicura ricchezza. Armand is a day scholar at Henry IV.'s school. I made up my mind he should have a public school training, yet could not reconcile myself to the thought of parting with him, so I compromised, as the Duc d'Orléans did before he became, or in order that he might become, Louis Philippe. Every morning Lucas, the old servant whom you will remember, takes Armand to school in time for the first lesson, and brings him home again at 4:30. In the house we have a private tutor, an admirable scholar who helps Armand with his work in the evenings, and calls him in the morning at the school hour. Lucas takes him some lunch during the play hour at midday. In this way I am with my boy at dinner and until he goes to bed at night, and I see him off in the morning. Armand is the same charming little fellow, full of feeling and unselfish impulse, whom you loved, and his tutor is quite pleased with him. I still have Nais and the baby, 2 restless little mortals, but I am quite as much a child as they are. I could not bring myself to lose the darling's sweet caresses. I could not live without the feeling that at any moment I can fly to Armand's bedside and watch his slumbers or snatch a kiss. Yet home education is not without its drawbacks, to which I am fully alive. Society, like nature, is a jealous power, and will not have her rights encroached on or her system set at naught. Thus, children who are brought up at home are exposed too early to the fire of the world. They see its passions and become at home with its subterfuges. The finer distinctions, which regulate the conduct of matured men and women, elude their perceptions, and they take feeling and passion for their guide instead of subordinating those to the code of society, whilst the gay trappings and tinsel which attract so much of the world's favour blind them to the importance of the more sober virtues. A child of 15, with the assurance of a man of the world, is a thing against all nature. At 25 he will be prematurely old, and his precocious knowledge only unfits him for the genuine study on which all solid ability must rest. Life in society is one long comedy, and those who take part in it, like other actors, reflect back impressions which never penetrate below the surface. A mother, therefore, who wishes not to part from her children, must resolutely determine that they shall not enter the gay world. She must have courage to resist their inclinations, as well as her own, and keep them in the background. Cornelia had to keep her jewels under lock and key. Shall I do less for the children who are all the world to me? Now that I am 30, the heat of the day is over. The hardest bit of the road lies behind me. In a few years I shall be an old woman, and the sense of duty done is an immense encouragement. It would almost seem as though my trio can read my thoughts and shape themselves accordingly. A mysterious bond of sympathy unites me to these children who have never left my side. If they knew the blank in my life which they have to fill, they could not be more lavish of the solace they bring. Armand, who was dull and dreamy during his first 3 years at school, and caused me some uneasiness, has made a sudden start. Doubtless he realized, in a way most children never do, the aim of all this preparatory work, which is to sharpen the intelligence, to get them into habits of application and accustom them to that fundamental principle of all society, obedience. My dear, a few days ago I had the proud joy of seeing Armand crowned at the great interscholastic competition in the crowded Sorbonne, when your godson received the first prize for translation. At the school distribution he got 2 first prizes, one for verse and one for an essay. I went quite white when his name was called out, and longed to shout aloud, "I am his mother!" Little Nais squeezed my hand till it hurt. If at such a moment it were possible to feel pain. Ah, Louise, a day like this might outweigh many a dream of love. His brother's triumphs have spurred on little Renee, who wants to go to school too. Sometimes the 3 children make such a racket, shouting and rushing about the house, that I wonder how my head stands it. I am always with them. No one else, not even Mary, is allowed to take care of my children. But the calling of a mother, if taxing, has so many compensating joys. To see a child leave its play and run to hug one out of the fullness of its heart, what could be sweeter? Then it is only being constantly with them that one can study their characters. It is the duty of a mother, and one which she can depute to no hired teacher, to decipher the tastes, temper, and natural aptitudes of her children from their infancy. All home-bred children are distinguished by ease of manner and tact, 2 acquired qualities which may go far to supply the lack of natural ability, whereas no natural ability can atone for the loss of this early training. I have already learned to discriminate this difference of tone in the men whom I meet in society, and to trace the hand of a woman in the formation of a young man's manners. How could any woman defraud her children of such a possession? You see what rewards attend the performance of my tasks. Armand, I feel certain, will make an admirable judge, the most upright of public servants, the most devoted of deputies. And where would you find a sailor bolder, more adventurous, more astute than my Renee will be a few years hence? The little rascal has already an iron will; whatever he wants, he manages to get. He will try 1,000 circuitous ways to reach his end, and, if not successful then, will devise 1,001st. Where dear Armand quietly resigns himself and tries to get at the reason of things, Renee will storm and strive and puzzle, chattering all the time, till at last he finds some chink in the obstacle. If there is room for the blade of a knife to pass, his little carriage will ride through in triumph. And Nais is so completely a second self that I can hardly realize her as distinct from my own flesh and blood. What a darling she is, and how I love to make a little lady of her, to dress her curly hair, tender thoughts mingling the while with every touch. I must have her happy. I shall only give her to the man who loves her and whom she loves. But heavens, when I let her put on her little ornaments, or pass a cherry-colored ribbon through her hair, or fasten the shoes on her tiny feet, a sickening thought comes over me. How can one order the destiny of a girl? Who can say that she will not love a scoundrel or some man who is indifferent to her? Tears often spring to my eyes as I watch her. This lovely creature, this flower, this rosebud which has blossomed in one's heart, to be handed over to a man who will tear it from the stem and leave it bare. Louise, it is you who in 2 years have not written 3 words to tell me of your welfare. It is you who have recalled to my mind the terrible possibilities of marriage, so full of anguish for a mother wrapped up, as I am, in her child. Farewell now, for in truth you don't deserve my friendship, and I hardly know how to write. Oh, answer me, dear Louise. End of letter 51.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 52. Madame Gaston to Madame de l'Estrade. The Chalet. So, after a silence of 2 years, you are pricked by curiosity, and want to know why I have not written. My dear Renee, there are no words, no images, no language to express my happiness. That we have strength to bear it sums up all I could say. It costs us no effort, for we are in perfect sympathy. The whole 2 years have known no note of discord in the harmony, no jarring word in the interchange of feeling, no shade of difference in our lightest wish. Not one in this long succession of days has failed to bear its own peculiar fruit. Not a moment has passed without being enriched by the play of fancy. So far are we from dreading the canker of monotony in our life, that our only fear is lest it should not be long enough to contain all the poetic creations of a love as rich and varied in its development as nature herself. Of disappointment not a trace. We find more pleasure in being together than on the first day, and each hour as it goes by discloses fresh reason for our love. Every day as we take our evening stroll after dinner, we tell each other that we really must go and see what is doing in Paris, just as one might talk of going to Switzerland. "Only think," Gaston will exclaim, "such and such a boulevard is being made. The Madeleine is finished. We ought to see it. Let us go to-morrow." And to-morrow comes, and we are in no hurry to get up, and we breakfast in our bedroom. Then midday is on us, and it is too hot. A siesta seems appropriate. Then Gaston wishes to look at me, and he gazes on my face as though it were a picture, losing himself in this contemplation which, as you may suppose, is not one-sided. Tears rise to the eyes of both as we think of our love, and tremble. I am still the mistress, pretending, that is, to give less than I receive, and I revel in this deception. To a woman what can be sweeter than to see passion ever held in check by tenderness, and the man who is her master stayed, like a timid suitor, by a word from her, within the limits that she chooses? You asked me to describe him, but, Renee, it is not possible to make a portrait of the man we love. How could the heart be kept out of the work? Besides, to be frank between ourselves, we may admit that one of the dire effects of civilization on our manners is to make of man in society a being so utterly different from the natural man of strong feeling, that sometimes not a single point of likeness can be found between these two aspects of the same person. The man who falls into the most graceful operatic poses, as he pours sweet nothings into your ear by the fire at night, may be entirely destitute of those more intimate charms which a woman values. On the other hand, an ugly, boorish, badly dressed figure may mark a man endowed with the very genius of love, and who has a perfect mastery over situations which might baffle us with our superficial graces. A man whose conventional aspect accords with his real nature, who, in the intimacy of wedded love, possesses that inborn grace which can be neither given nor acquired, but which Greek art has embodied in statuary, that careless innocence of the ancient poets which, even in frank undress, seems to clothe the soul as with a veil of modesty, this is our ideal, born of our own conceptions, and linked with the universal harmony which seems to be the reality underlying all created things. To find this ideal in life is the problem which haunts the imagination of every woman. In Gaston I have found it. Ah, dear, I did not know what love could be, united to youth, talent, and beauty. Gaston has no affectations, he moves in an instinctive and unstudied grace. When we walk alone together in the woods, his arm round my waist, mine resting on his shoulder, body fitting to body, and head touching head, our step is so even, uniform, and gentle, that those who see us pass by night take the vision for a single figure gliding over the gravelled walks. Like one of Homer's immortals. A like harmony exists in our desires, our thoughts, our words. More than once on some evening when a passing shower has left the leaves glistening and the moist grass bright with a more vivid green, it has chanced that we ended our walk without uttering a word, as we listened to the patter of falling drops and feasted our eyes on the scarlet sunset, flaring on the hill-tops, or dyeing with a warmer tone the grey of the tree-trunks. Beyond a doubt our thoughts then rose to heaven in silent prayer, pleading, as it were, for our happiness. At times a cry would escape us at the moment when some sudden bend on the path opened up fresh beauties. What words can tell how honey-sweet, how full of meaning, is a kiss half timidly exchanged within the sanctuary of nature? It is as though God had created us to worship in this fashion. And we return home, each more deeply in love than ever. A love so passionate between old married people would be an outrage on society in Paris. Only in the heart of the woods, like lovers, can we give scope to it. To come to particulars, Gaston is of middle height, the height proper to all men of purpose. Neither stout nor thin, his figure is admirably made, with ample fullness in the proportions, while every motion is agile. He leaps a ditch with the easy grace of a wild animal. Whatever his attitude, he seems to have an instinctive sense of balance, and this is very rare in men who are given to thought. Though a dark man, he has an extraordinarily fair complexion. His jet-black hair contrasts finely with the lustreless tints of the neck and forehead. He has the tragic head of Louis XIII. His moustache and tuft have been allowed to grow, but I made him shave the whiskers and beard, which were getting too common. An honourable poverty has been his safeguard, and handed him over to me, unsoiled by the loose life which ruins so many young men. His teeth are magnificent, and he has a constitution of iron. His keen blue eyes, for me full of tenderness, will flash like lightning at any rousing thought. Like all men of strong character and powerful mind, he has an admirable temper. Its evenness would surprise you, as it did me. I have listened to the tale of many a woman's home troubles. I have heard of the moods and depression of men dissatisfied with themselves, who either won't get old or age ungracefully, men who carry about through life the rankling memory of some youthful excess, whose veins run poison and whose eyes are never frankly happy, men who cloak suspicion under bad temper and make their women pay for an hour's peace by a morning of annoyance, who take vengeance on us for a beauty which is hateful to them because they have ceased themselves to be attractive. All these are horrors unknown to youth. They are the penalty of unequal unions. Oh, my dear, whatever you do, don't marry Athenaeus to an old man. But his smile, how I feast on it! A smile which is always there, yet always fresh through the play of subtle fancy. A speaking smile which makes of the lips a storehouse for thoughts of love and unspoken gratitude. A smile which links present joys to past. For nothing is allowed to drop out of our common life. The smallest works of nature have become part and parcel of our joy. In these delightful woods everything is alive and eloquent of ourselves. An old moss-grown oak, near the woodsman's house on the roadside, reminds us how we sat there, wearied under its shade, while Gaston taught me about the mosses at our feet, and told me their story, till, gradually ascending from science to science, we touched the very confines of creation. There is something so kindred in our minds that they seem to me like two editions of the same book. You see what a literary tendency I have developed. We both have the habit, or the gift, of looking at every subject broadly, of taking in all its points of view, and the proof we are constantly giving ourselves of the singleness of our inward vision is an ever new pleasure. We have actually come to look on this community of mind as a pledge of love, and if it ever failed us, it would mean as much to us as would a breach of fidelity in an ordinary home. My life, full as it is of pleasures, would seem to you nevertheless extremely laborious. To begin with, my dear, you must know that Louise Armande Marie de Chaulieu does her own room. I could not bear that a hired menial, some woman or girl from the outside, should become initiated, literary touch again, into the secrets of my bedroom. The veriest trifles connected with the worship of my heart partake of its sacred character. This is not jealousy, It is self-respect. Thus my room is done out with all the care a young girl in love bestows on her person, and with the precision of an old maid. My dressing-room is no chaos of litter. On the contrary, it makes a charming boudoir. My keen eye has foreseen all contingencies. At whatever hour the lord and master enters, he will find nothing to distress, surprise, or shock him. He is greeted by flowers, scents, and everything that can please the eye. I get up in the early dawn while he is still sleeping, and, without disturbing him, pass into the dressing-room, where, profiting by my mother's experience, I remove the traces of sleep by bathing in cold water. For during sleep the skin, being less active, does not perform its functions adequately. It becomes warm, and covered with a sort of mist or atmosphere of sticky matter, visible to the eye. From a sponge bath a woman issues 10 years younger, and this, perhaps, is the interpretation of the myth of Venus rising from the sea. So the cold water restores to me the saucy charm of dawn, and having combed and scented my hair, and made a most fastidious toilette, I glide back, snake-like, in order that my master may find me, dainty as a spring morning, at his wakening. He is charmed with this freshness, as of a newly opened flower, without having the least idea how it is produced. The regular toilette of the day is a matter for my maid, and this takes place later in a larger room set aside for the purpose. As you may suppose, there is also a toilette for going to bed. 3 times a day, you see, or it may be 4, do I array myself for the delight of my husband, which, again, dear one, is suggestive of certain ancient myths. But our work is not all play. We take a great deal of interest in our flowers, in the beauties of the hothouse, and in our trees. We give ourselves in all seriousness to horticulture, and embosom the chalet in flowers of which we are passionately fond. Our lawns are always green, our shrubberies as well tended as those of a millionaire. And nothing, I assure you, can match the beauty of our walled garden. We are regular gluttons over our fruit, and watch with tender interest our Montreal peaches, our hotbeds, our laden trellises, and pyramidal pear-trees. But lest these rural pursuits should fail to satisfy my beloved's mind, I have advised him to finish, in the quiet of this retreat, some plays which were begun in his starvation days, and which are really very fine. This is the only kind of literary work which can be done in odd moments, for it requires long intervals of reflection, and does not demand the elaborate pruning essential to a finished style. One can't make a task-work of dialogue. There must be biting touches, summings up, and flashes of wit, which are the blossoms of the mind, and come rather by inspiration than reflection. This sort of intellectual sport is very much in my line. I assist Gaston in his work, and in this way manage to accompany him even in the boldest flights of his imagination. Do you see now how it is that my winter evenings never drag? Our servants have such an easy time that never once since we were married have we had to reprimand any of them. When questioned about us, they have had wit enough to draw on their imaginations, and have given us out as the companion and secretary of a lady and gentleman supposed to be travelling. They never go out without asking permission, which they know will not be refused. They are contented, too, and see plainly that it will be their own fault if there is a change for the worse. The gardeners are allowed to sell the surplus of our fruits and vegetables. The dairymaid does the same with the milk, the cream, and the fresh butter, on condition that the best of the produce is reserved for us. They are well pleased with their profits, and we are delighted with an abundance which no money and no ingenuity can procure in that terrible Paris, where it costs 100 francs to produce a single fine peach. All this is not without its meaning, my dear. I wish to fill the place of society to my husband. Now society is amusing, and therefore his solitude must not be allowed to pall on him. I believed myself jealous in the old days, when I merely allowed myself to be loved. Now I know real jealousy, the jealousy of the lover. A single indifferent glance unnerves me. From time to time I say to myself, suppose he ceased to love me, and a shudder goes through me. I tremble before him, as the Christian before his God. Alas, Renee, I am still without a child. The time will surely come, it must come, when our hermitage will need a father's and a mother's care to brighten it, when we shall both pine to see the little frocks and pelisses, the brown or golden heads, leaping, running through our shrubberies and flowery paths. Oh, it is a cruel jest of nature's, a flowering tree that bears no fruit. The thought of your lovely children goes through me like a knife. My life has grown narrower, while yours has expanded and shed its rays afar. The passion of love is essentially selfish, while motherhood widens the circle of our feelings. How well I felt this difference when I read your kind, tender letter. To see you thus living in 3 hearts roused my envy. Yes, you are happy, you have had wisdom to obey the laws of social life, whilst I stand outside, an alien. Children, dear and loving children, can alone console a woman for the loss of her beauty. I shall soon be 30, and at that age the dirge within begins. What though I am still beautiful, the limits of my woman's reign are none the less in sight. When they are reached, what then? I shall be 40 before he is. I shall be old while he is still young. When this thought goes to my heart, I lie at his feet for an hour at a time, making him swear to tell me instantly if ever he feels his love diminishing. But he is a child. He swears as though the mere suggestion were an absurdity, and he is so beautiful that, Renee, you understand, I believe him. Good-bye, sweet one. Shall we ever again let years pass without writing? Happiness is a monotonous theme, and that is perhaps the reason why, to souls who love, Dante appears even greater in the Paradiso than in the Inferno. I am not Dante. I am only your friend, and I don't want to bore you. You can write, for in your children you have an ever-growing, ever-varying source of happiness, while mine... No more of this. 1,000 loves. End of letter 52. Read by Kara Schallenberg on March 30th, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, September 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 53. Madame de l'Estorade to Madame Gaston. My dear Louise, I have read and reread your letter, and the more deeply I enter into its spirit, the clearer does it become to me that it is the letter, not of a woman, but of a child. You are the same old Louise, and you forget what I used to repeat over and over again to you, that the passion of love belongs rightly to a state of nature, and has only been purloined by civilization. So fleeting is its character that the resources of society are powerless to modify its primitive condition, and it becomes the effort of all noble minds to make a man of the infant Cupid. But, as you yourself admit, such love ceases to be natural. Society, my dear, abhors sterility, but, substituting a lasting sentiment for the mere passing frenzy of nature, it has succeeded in creating that greatest of all human inventions, the family, which is the enduring basis of all organized society. To the accomplishment of this end, it has sacrificed the individual, man as well as woman, for we must not shut our eyes to the fact that a married man devotes his energy, his power, and all his possession to his wife. Is it not she who reaps the benefit of all his care? For whom, if not for her, are the luxury and wealth, the position and distinction, the comfort and the gaiety of the home? Oh, my sweet, once again you have taken the wrong turning in life. To be adored is a young girl's dream, which may survive a few springtimes. It cannot be that of the mature woman, the wife and mother. To a woman's vanity it is, perhaps, enough to know that she can command adoration if she likes. If you would live the life of a wife and mother, return, I beg of you, to Paris. Let me repeat my warning. It is not misfortune which you have to dread, as others do, it is happiness. Listen to me, my child. It is the simple things of life, bread, air, silence, of which we do not tire. They have no piquancy which can create distaste. It is highly flavored dishes which irritate the palate, and in the end exhaust it. Were it possible that I should to-day be loved by a man for whom I could conceive a passion, such as yours for Gaston, I would still cling to the duties and the children who are so dear to me. To a woman's heart, the feelings of a mother are among the simple, natural, fruitful, and inexhaustible things of life. I can recall the day, now nearly 14 years ago, when I embarked on a life of self-sacrifice with the despair of a shipwrecked mariner clinging to the mast of his vessel. Now, as I invoke the memory of past years, I feel that I would make the same choice again. No other guiding principle is so safe, or leads to such rich reward. The spectacle of your life, which, for all the romance and poetry with which you invest it, still remains based on nothing but a ruthless selfishness, has helped to strengthen my convictions. This is the last time I shall speak to you in this way, but I could not refrain from once more pleading with you when I found out that your happiness had been proof against the most searching of all trials. And one more point I must urge on you, suggested by my meditations on your retirement. Life, whether of the body or the heart, consists in certain balanced movements. Any excess introduced into the working of this routine gives rise either to pain or to pleasure, both of which are a mere fever of the soul, bound to be fugitive because nature is not so framed as to support it long. But to make of life one long excess is surely to choose sickness for one's portion. You are sick because you maintain at the temperature of passion a feeling which marriage ought to convert into a steadying, purifying influence. Yes, my sweet, I see it clearly now. The glory of a home consists in this very calm, this intimacy, this sharing alike of good and evil, which the vulgar ridicule. How noble was the reply of the Duchess de Sully, the wife of the great Sully, to someone who remarked that her husband, for all his grave exterior, did not scruple to keep a mistress. "What of that?" she said. "I represent the honor of the house, and should decline to play the part of a courtesan there." But you, Louise, who are naturally more passionate than tender, would be at once the wife and the mistress. With the soul of a Heloise and the passions of a Saint Teresa, you slip the leash on all your impulses, so long as they are sanctioned by law. In a word, you degrade the marriage rite. Surely the tables are turned. The reproaches you once heaped on me for immorally, as you said, seizing the means of happiness from the very outset of my wedded life, might be directed against yourself for grasping at everything which may serve your passion. What, must nature and society alike be in bondage to your caprice? You are the old Louise; you have never acquired the qualities which ought to be a woman's. Self-willed and unreasonable as a girl, you introduce withal into your love the keenest and most mercenary of calculations. Are you sure that, after all, the price you ask for your toilettes is not too high? All these precautions are to my mind very suggestive of mistrust. Oh, dear Louise, if only you knew the sweetness of a mother's efforts to discipline herself in kindness and gentleness to all about her! My proud, self-sufficing temper gradually dissolved into a soft melancholy, which in turn has been swallowed up by those delights of motherhood which have been its reward. If the early hours were toilsome, the evening will be tranquil and clear. My dread is lest the day of your life should take the opposite course. When I read your letter to a close, I prayed God to send you among us for a day, that you might see what family life really is, and learn the nature of those joys which are lasting and sweeter than tongue can tell, because they are genuine, simple, and natural. But alas, what chance have I, with the best of arguments, against a fallacy which makes you happy? As I write these words, my eyes fill with tears. I had felt so sure that some months of honeymoon would provide a surfeit and restore you to reason. But I see that there is no limit to your appetite, and that, having killed a man who loved you, you will not cease till you have killed love itself. Farewell, dear misguided friend. I am in despair that the letter which I hoped might reconcile you to society by its picture of my happiness should have brought forth only a paean of selfishness. Yes, your love is selfish. You love Gaston far less for himself than for what he is to you. End of letter 53.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 54. Madame Gaston to the Comtesse de l'Estrade. May 20th. Renee, calamity has come. No, that is no word for it. It has burst like a thunderbolt over your poor Louise. You know what that means. Calamity for me is doubt. Certainty would be death. The day before yesterday, when I had finished my first toilette, I looked everywhere for Gaston to take a little turn with me before lunch, but in vain. I went to the stable, and there I saw his mare all in a lather, while the groom was removing the foam with a knife before rubbing her down. "Who in the world has put Fedelta in such a state?" I asked. "Master," replied the lad. I saw the mud of Paris on the mare's legs, for country mud is quite different, and at once it flashed through me. He has been to Paris. This thought raised a swarm of others in my heart, and it seemed as though all the life in my body rushed there. To go to Paris without telling me, at the hour when I leave him alone, to hasten there and back at such speed as to distress Fedelta. Suspicion clutched me in its iron grip, till I could hardly breathe. I walked aside a few steps to a seat, where I tried to recover my self-command. Here Gaston found me, apparently pale and fluttered, for he immediately exclaimed, "What is wrong?" in a tone of such alarm that I rose and took his arm. But my muscles refused to move, and I was forced to sit down again. Then he took me in his arms and carried me to the parlor close by, where the frightened servants pressed after us till Gaston motioned them away. Once left to ourselves, I refused to speak, but was able to reach my room, where I shut myself in to weep my fill. Gaston remained something like 2 hours at my door, listening to my sobs and questioning with angelic patience his poor darling, who made no response. At last I told him that I would see him when my eyes were less red and my voice was steady again. My formal words drove him from the house. But by the time I had bathed my eyes in iced water and cooled my face, I found him in our room, the door into which was open, though I had heard no steps. He begged me to tell him what was wrong. "Nothing," I said. "I saw the mud of Paris on Fedelta's trembling legs. It seemed strange that you should go there without telling me, but of course you are free." "I shall punish you for such wicked thoughts by not giving any explanation till to-morrow," he replied. "Look at me," I said. My eyes met his. Deep answered to deep. No, not a trace of the cloud of disloyalty which, rising from the soul, must dim the clearness of the eye. I feigned satisfaction, though really unconvinced. It is not women only who can lie and dissemble. The whole of the day we spent together. Ever and again, as I looked at him, I realized how fast my heartstrings were bound to him. How I trembled and fluttered within when, after a moment's absence, he reappeared. I live in him, not in myself. My cruel sufferings gave the lie to your unkind letter. Did I ever feel my life thus bound up in the noble Spaniard who adored me, as I adore this heartless boy? I hate that mare. Fool that I was to keep horses! But the next thing would have been to lame Gaston or imprison him in the cottage. Wild thoughts like these filled my brain. You see how near I was to madness. If love be not the cage, what power on earth can hold back the man who wants to be free? I asked him point blank. "Do I bore you?" "What needless torture you give yourself," was his reply, while he looked at me with tender, pitying eyes. "Never have I loved you so deeply." "If that is true, my beloved, let me sell Fedelta," I answered. "Sell her, by all means." The reply crushed me. Was it not a covert taunt at my wealth and his own nothingness in the house? This may never have occurred to him, but I thought it had, and once more I left him. It was night, and I would go to bed. Oh, Renee, to be alone with a harrowing thought drives one to thoughts of death. These charming gardens, the starry night, the cool air, laden with incense from our wealth of flowers, our valley, our hills, all seemed to me gloomy, black, and desolate. It was as though I lay at the foot of a precipice, surrounded by serpents and poisonous plants, and saw no God in the sky. Such a night ages a woman. Next morning I said, "Take Fedelta, and be off to Paris. Don't sell her. I love her. Does she not carry you?" But he was not deceived. My tone betrayed the storm of feeling which I strove to conceal. "Trust me," he replied, and the gesture with which he held out his hand, the glance of his eye, were so full of loyalty that I was overcome. "What petty creatures women are!" I exclaimed. "No, you love me, that is all," he said, pressing me to his heart. "Go to Paris without me," I said, and this time I made him understand that my suspicions were laid aside. He went. I thought he would have stayed. I won't attempt to tell you what I suffered. I found a second self within, quite strange to me. A crisis like this has, for the woman who loves, a tragic solemnity that baffles words. The whole of life rises before you then, and you search in vain for any horizon to it. The veriest trifle is big with meaning. A glance contains a volume, icicles drift on uttered words, and the death sentence is read in a movement of the lips. I thought he would have paid me back in kind. Had I not been magnanimous? I climbed to the top of the chalet, and my eyes followed him on the road. Ah, my dear Renee, he vanished from my sight with an appalling swiftness. "How keen he is to go!" was the thought that sprang of itself. Once more alone, I fell back into the hell of possibilities, the maelstrom of mistrust. There were moments when I would have welcomed any certainty, even the worst, as a relief from the torture of suspense. Suspense is a duel carried on in the heart, and we give no quarter to ourselves. I paced up and down the walks. I returned to the house, only to tear out again like a madwoman. Gaston, who left at 7 o'clock, did not return till 11. Now, as it only takes half an hour to reach Paris through the Park of St. Cloud and the Bois de Boulogne, it is plain that he must have spent 3 hours in town. He came back radiant, with a whip in his hand for me, an india-rubber whip with a gold handle. For a fortnight I had been without a whip, my old one being worn and broken. "Was it for this you tortured me?" I said, as I admired the workmanship of this beautiful ornament, which contains a little scent-box at one end. Then it flashed on me that the present was a fresh artifice. Nevertheless, I threw myself at once on his neck, not without reproaching him gently for having caused me so much pain for the sake of a trifle. He was greatly pleased with his ingenuity. His eyes and his whole bearing plainly showed the restrained triumph of the successful plotter, for there is a radiance of the soul which is reflected in every feature and turn of the body. While still examining the beauties of this work of art, I asked him at a moment when we happened to be looking at each other in the face, "Who is the artist?" "A friend of mine." "Ah, I see it has been mounted by Verdier," and I read the name of the shop printed on the handle. Gaston is nothing but a child yet. He blushed, and I made much of him as a reward for the shame he felt in deceiving me. I pretended to notice nothing, and he may well have thought the incident was over. May 25th. The next morning I was in my riding habit by 6 o'clock, and by 7 landed at Verdières, where several whips of the same pattern were shown to me. One of the men serving recognized mine when I pointed it out to him. "We sold that yesterday to a young gentleman," he said. And from the description I gave him of my traitor Gaston, not a doubt was left of his identity. I will spare you the palpitations which rent my heart during that journey to Paris, and the little scene there, which marked the turning point of my life. By 6:30 I was home again, and Gaston found me, fresh and blooming in my morning dress, sauntering about with a make-believe nonchalance. I felt confident that old Philippe, who had been taken into my confidence, would not have betrayed my absence. "Gaston," I said, as we walked by the side of the lake, "you cannot blind me to the difference between a work of art inspired by friendship and something which has been cast in a mould." He turned white and fixed his eyes on me rather than on the damaging piece of evidence I thrust before them. "My dear," I went on, "this is not a whip, it is a screen behind which you are hiding something from me." Thereupon I gave myself the gratification of watching his hopeless entanglement in the coverts and labyrinths of deceit and the desperate efforts he made to find some wall he might scale and thus escape. In vain. He had perforce to remain upon the field, face to face with an adversary, who at last laid down her arms in a feigned complaisance. But it was too late. The fatal mistake, against which my mother had tried to warn me, was made. My jealousy, exposed in all its nakedness, had led to war and all its stratagems between Gaston and myself. Jealousy, dear, has neither sense nor decency. I made up my mind now to suffer in silence, but to keep my eyes open until my doubts were resolved one way or another. Then I would either break with Gaston or bow to my misfortune. No middle course is possible for a woman who respects herself. What can he be concealing? For a secret there is, and the secret has to do with a woman. Is it some youthful escapade for which he still blushes? But if so, what? The word "what" is written in letters of fire on all I see. I read it in the glassy water of my lake, in the shrubbery, in the clouds, on the ceilings, at table, in the flowers of the carpets. A voice cries to me, "What?" in my sleep. Dating from the morning of my discovery, a cruel interest has sprung into our lives, and I have become familiar with the bitterest thought that can corrode the heart, the thought of treachery in him one loves. Oh, my dear, there is heaven and hell together in such a life. Never had I felt this scorching flame, I to whom love had appeared only in the form of devoutest worship. "So you wished to know the gloomy torture chamber of pain," I said to myself. "Good, the spirits of evil have heard your prayer. Go on your road, unhappy wretch." May 30th. Since that fatal day, Gaston no longer works with the careless ease of the wealthy artist, whose work is merely pastime. He sets himself tasks like a professional writer. 4 hours a day he devotes to finishing his 2 plays. He wants money. A voice within whispered the thought, "But why? He spends next to nothing. We have absolutely no secrets from each other. There is not a corner of his study which my eyes and my fingers may not explore. His yearly expenditure does not amount to 2,000 francs, and I know that he has 30,000. I can hardly say laid by, but scattered loose in a drawer. You can guess what is coming. At midnight, while he was sleeping, I went to see if the money was still there. An icy shiver ran through me. The drawer was empty. That same week I discovered that he went to Sèvres to fetch his letters, and these letters he must tear up immediately, for though I am a very Figaro in contrivances, I have never yet seen a trace of one. Alas, my sweet, despite the fine promises and vows by which I bound myself after the scene of the whip, an impulse, which I can only call madness, drove me to follow him in one of his rapid rides to the post office. Gaston was appalled to be thus discovered on horseback, paying the postage of a letter which he held in his hand. He looked fixedly at me, and then put spurs to Fedelta. The pace was so hard that I felt shaken to bits when I reached the lodge gate, though my mental agony was such at the time that it might well have dulled all consciousness of bodily pain. Arrived at the gate, Gaston said nothing. He rang the bell and waited without a word. I was more dead than alive. I might be mistaken or I might not, but in neither case was it fitting for Armande Louise Marie de Chaulieu to play the spy. I had sunk to the level of the gutter, by the side of courtesans, opera dancers, mere creatures of instinct. Even the vulgar shop girl or humble seamstress might look down on me. What a moment! At last the door opened. He handed his horse to the groom, and I also dismounted, but into his arms, which were stretched out to receive me. I threw my skirt over my left arm, gave him my right, and we walked on, still in silence. The few steps we thus took might be reckoned to me for 100 years of purgatory. A swarm of thoughts beset me as I walked, now seeming to take visible form in tongues of fire before my eyes, now assailing my mind, each with its own poisoned dart. When the groom and the horses were far away, I stopped Gaston, and looking him in the face, said, as I pointed, with a gesture that you should have seen, to the fatal letter still in his right hand, "May I read it?" He gave it to me. I opened it, and found a letter from Nathan, the dramatic author, informing Gaston that a play of his had been accepted, learned, rehearsed, and would be produced the following Saturday. He also enclosed a box ticket. Though for me this was the opening of heaven's gates to the martyr, yet the fiend would not leave me in peace, but kept crying, "Where are the 30,000 francs?" It was a question which self-respect, dignity, all my old self, in fact, prevented me from uttering. If my thought became speech, I might as well throw myself into the lake at once, and yet I could hardly keep the words down. Dear friend, was not this a trial passing the strength of woman? I returned the letter, saying, "My poor Gaston, you are getting bored down here. Let us go back to Paris, won't you?" "To Paris?" he said. "But why? I only wanted to find out if I had any gift, to taste the flowing bowl of success." Nothing would be easier than for me to ransack the drawer some time while he is working, and pretend great surprise at finding the money gone. But that would be going half-way to meet the answer. "Oh, my friend so and so was hard up," etc., which a man of Gaston's quick wit would not have far to seek. The moral, my dear, is that the brilliant success of this play, which all Paris is crowding to see, is due to us, though the whole credit goes to Nathan. I am represented by one of the 2 stars in the legend, Et M***. I saw the first night from the depths of one of the stage boxes. July 1st. Gaston's work and his visits to Paris shall continue. He is preparing new plays, partly because he wants a pretext for going to Paris, partly in order to make money. 3 plays have been accepted, and 2 more are commissioned. Oh, my dear, I am lost, all is darkness around me. I would set fire to the house in a moment if that would bring light. What does it all mean? Is he ashamed of taking money from me? He is too high-minded for so trumpery a matter to weigh with him. Besides, scruples of the kind could only be the outcome of some love affair. A man would take anything from his wife, but from the woman he has ceased to care for, or is thinking of deserting, it is different. If he needs such large sums, it must be to spend them on a woman. For himself, why should he hesitate to draw from my purse? Our savings amount to 100,000 francs. In short, my sweetheart, I have explored a whole continent of possibilities, and after carefully weighing all the evidence, am convinced I have a rival. I am deserted. For whom? At all costs I must see the unknown. July 10th. Light has come, and it is all over with me. Yes, Renee, at the age of 30, in the perfection of my beauty, with all the resources of a ready wit and the seductive charms of dress at my command, I am betrayed. And for whom? A large-boned Englishwoman with big feet and thick waist, a regular British cow. There is no longer room for doubt. I will tell you the history of the last few days. Worn out with suspicions, which were fed by Gaston's guilty silence, for if he had helped a friend, why keep it a secret from me? His insatiable desire for money, and his frequent journeys to Paris, jealous too of the work from which he seemed unable to tear himself, I at last made up my mind to take certain steps, of such a degrading nature that I cannot tell you about them. Suffice it to say that 3 days ago I ascertained that Gaston, when in Paris, visits a house in the Rue de la Ville-l'Evêque, where he guards his mistress with jealous mystery, unexampled in Paris. The porter was surly, and I could get little out of him, but that little was enough to put an end to any lingering hope, and with hope to life. On this point my mind was resolved, and I only waited to learn the whole truth first. With this object I went to Paris, and took rooms in a house exactly opposite the one which Gaston visits. Thence I saw him with my own eyes enter the courtyard on horseback. Too soon a ghastly fact forced itself on me. This Englishwoman, who seems to me about 36, is known as Madame Gaston. This discovery was my death-blow. I saw him next walking in the Tuileries with a couple of children. Oh, my dear, 2 children, the living images of Gaston. The likeness is so strong that it bears scandal on the face of it. And what pretty children, in their handsome English costumes. She is the mother of his children. Here is the key to the whole mystery. The woman herself might be a Greek statue, stepped down from some monument. Cold and white as marble, she moves sedately with a mother's pride. She is undeniably beautiful, but heavy as a man of war. There is no breeding or distinction about her, nothing of the English lady. Probably she is a farmer's daughter from some wretched and remote country village, or it may be the 11th child of some poor clergyman. I reached home, after a miserable journey, during which all sorts of fiendish thoughts had me at their mercy, with hardly any life left in me. Was she married? Did he know her before our marriage? Had she been deserted by some rich man, whose mistress she was, and thus thrown back upon Gaston's hands? Conjectures without end flitted through my brain, as though conjecture were needed in the presence of the children. The next day I returned to Paris, and by a free use of my purse extracted from the porter the information that Madame Gaston was legally married. His reply to my question took the form, "Yes, miss." July 15th. My dear, my love for Gaston is stronger than ever since that morning, and he has every appearance of being still more deeply in love. He is so young. A score of times it has been on my lips, when we rise in the morning, to say, "Then you love me better than the lady of the Rue de la Ville-l'Evêque?" But I dare not explain to myself why the words are checked on my tongue. "Are you very fond of children?" I asked. "Oh, yes," was his reply, "but children will come." "What makes you think so?" "I have consulted the best doctors, and they agree in advising me to travel for a couple of months." "Gaston," I said, "if love in absence had been possible for me, do you suppose I should ever have left the convent?" He laughed, but as for me, dear, the word travel pierced my heart. Rather, far rather, would I leap from the top of the house than be rolled down the staircase, step by step. Farewell, my sweetheart. I have arranged for my death to be easy and without horrors, but certain. I made my will yesterday. You can come to me now, the prohibition is removed. Come then, and receive my last farewell. I will not die by inches. My death, like my life, shall bear the impress of dignity and grace. Good-bye, dear sister soul, whose affection has never wavered nor grown weary, but has been the constant tender moonlight of my soul. If the intensity of passion has not been ours, at least we have been spared its venomous bitterness. How rightly you have judged of life! Farewell. End of letter 54. Read by Kara Schallenberg on March 30th, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, September 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 55. The Comtesse de l'Estorade to Madame Gaston, July 16th. My dear Louise, I send this letter by an express before hastening to the chalet myself. Take courage. Your last letter seemed to me so frantic that I thought myself justified under the circumstances in confiding all to Louis. It was a question of saving you from yourself. If the means we have employed have been, like yours, repulsive, yet the result is so satisfactory that I am certain you will approve. I went so far as to set the police to work, but the whole thing remains a secret between the prefect, ourselves, and you. In one word, Gaston is a jewel. But here are the facts. His brother Louis Gaston died at Calcutta while in the service of a mercantile company, when he was on the very point of returning to France, a rich, prosperous, married man, having received a very large fortune with his wife, who was the widow of an English merchant. For 10 years he had worked hard that he might be able to send home enough to support his brother, to whom he was devotedly attached, and from whom his letters generously concealed all his trials and disappointments. Then came the failure of the great Halmer house. The widow was ruined, and the sudden shock affected Louis Gaston's brain. He had no mental energy left to resist the disease which attacked him, and he died in Bengal, whither he had gone to try and realize the remnants of his wife's property. The dear good fellow had deposited with a banker a first sum of 300,000 francs, which was to go to his brother. But the banker was involved in the Halmer crash, and thus their last resource failed them. Louis's widow, the handsome woman whom you took for your rival, arrived in Paris with 2 children, your nephews, and an empty purse, her mother's jewels having barely sufficed to pay for bringing them over. The instructions which Louis Gaston had given the banker for sending the money to his brother enabled the widow to find your husband's former home. As Gaston had disappeared without leaving any address, Madame Louis Gaston was directed to d'Arthez, the only person who could give any information about him. D'Arthez was the more ready to relieve the young woman's pressing needs, because Louis Gaston, at the time of his marriage 4 years before, had written to make inquiries about his brother from the famous author, whom he knew to be one of his friends. The captain had consulted d'Arthez as to the best means of getting the money safely transferred to Marie, and d'Arthez had replied, telling him that Gaston was now a rich man through his marriage with the Baronne de Macumer. The personal beauty, which was the mother's rich heritage to her sons, had saved them both, one in India, the other in Paris, from destitution. A touching story, is it not? D'Arthez naturally wrote, after a time, to tell your husband of the condition of his sister-in-law and her children, informing him at the same time of the generous intentions of the Indian Gaston towards his Paris brother, which an unhappy chance had frustrated. Gaston, as you may imagine, hurried off to Paris. Here is the first ride accounted for. During the last 5 years he had saved 50,000 francs out of the income you forced him to accept, and this sum he invested in the public funds under the names of his 2 nephews, securing them each in this way an income of 1,200 francs. Next he furnished his sister-in-law's rooms, and promised her a quarterly allowance of 3,000 francs. Here you see the meaning of his dramatic labors and the pleasure caused him by the success of his first play. Madame Gaston, therefore, is no rival of yours, and has every right to your name. A man of Gaston's sensitive delicacy was bound to keep the affair secret from you, knowing as he did your generous nature. Nor does he look on what you gave him as his own. D'Arthez read me the letter he had from your husband, asking him to be one of the witnesses at his marriage. Gaston in this declares that his happiness would have been perfect but for one drawback of his poverty and indebtedness to you. A virgin soul is at the mercy of such scruples. Either they make themselves felt or they do not, and when they do, it is easy to imagine the conflict of feeling and embarrassment to which they give rise. Nothing is more natural than Gaston's wish to provide in secret a suitable maintenance for the woman who is his brother's widow, and who herself had set aside 100,000 francs for him from her own fortune. She is a handsome woman, warm-hearted and extremely well-bred, but not clever. She is a mother, and, you may be sure, I lost my heart to her at first sight when I found her with one child in her arms, and the other dressed like a little lord. The children first is written in every detail of her house. Far from being angry, therefore, with your beloved husband, you should find in all this a fresh reason for loving him. I have met him, and think him the most delightful young fellow in Paris. Yes, dear child, when I saw him, I had no difficulty in understanding that a woman might lose her head about him. His soul is mirrored in his countenance. If I were you, I should settle the widow and her children at the chalet, in a pretty little cottage which you could have built for them, and adopt the boys. Be at peace then, dear soul, and plan this little surprise, in your turn, for Gaston. End of letter 55.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 56. Madame Gaston to the Comtesse de l'Estorade. Ah, my dear friend, what can I say in answer except the cruel "It is too late" of that fool Lafayette to his royal master? Oh, my life, my sweet life, what physician will give it back to me? My own hand has dealt the death blow. Alas! have I not been a mere will-o'-the-wisp, whose twinkling spark was fated to perish before it reached a flame? My eyes rain torrents of tears, and yet they must not fall when I am with him. I fly to him, and he seeks me. My despair is all within. This torture Dante forgot to place in his Inferno. Come to see me die. End of letter 56. Read by Kara Schallenberg on March 2nd, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, September 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 57. The Comtesse de l'Estorade to the Comte de l'Estorade. The Chalet, August 7th. My love, take the children away to Provence without me. I remain with Louise, who has only a few days yet to live. I cannot leave either her or her husband, for whose reason I fear. You know the scrap of letter which sent me flying to Ville d'Avray, picking up the doctors on my way. Since then I have not left my darling friend, and it has been impossible to write to you, for I have sat up every night for a fortnight. When I arrived, I found her with Gaston, in full dress, beautiful, laughing, happy. It was a heroic falsehood. They were like two lovely children, together in their restored confidence. For a moment I was deceived, like Gaston, by the effrontery, but Louise pressed my hand, whispering, "He must not know, I am dying." An icy chill fell over me as I felt her burning hand and saw the red spots on her cheeks. I congratulated myself on my prudence in leaving the doctors in the wood till they should be sent for. "Leave us for a little while," she said to Gaston. "Two women who have not met for 5 years have plenty of secrets to talk over, and Renee, I have no doubt, has things to confide in me." Directly we were alone, she flung herself into my arms, unable longer to restrain her tears. "Tell me about it," I said. "I have brought with me, in case of need, the best surgeon and the best physician from the hospital, and Bianchon as well. There are 4 altogether." "Ah!" she cried, "have them in at once if they can save me, if there is still time. The passion which hurried me to death now cries for life." "But what have you done to yourself?" "I have, in a few days, brought myself to the last stage of consumption." "But how?" "I got myself into a profuse perspiration in the night, and then ran out and lay down by the side of the lake in the dew. Gaston thinks I have a cold, and I am dying." "Send him to Paris. I will fetch the doctors myself," I said, as I rushed out wildly to the spot where I had left them. Alas, my love, after the consultation was over, not one of the doctors gave me the least hope. They all believe that Louise will die with the fall of the leaves. The dear child's constitution has wonderfully helped the success of her plan. It seems she has a predisposition to this complaint, and though, in the ordinary course, she might have lived a long time, a few days' folly has made the case desperate. I cannot tell you what I felt on hearing this sentence, based on such clear explanations. You know that I have lived in Louise as much as in my own life. I was simply crushed, and could not stir to escort to the door these harbingers of evil. I don't know how long I remained lost in bitter thoughts, the tears running down my cheeks, when I was roused from my stupor by the words, "So there is no hope for me," in a clear, angelic voice. It was Louise, with her hand on my shoulder. She made me get up, and carried me off to her small drawing room. With a beseeching glance, she went on, "Stay with me till the end. I won't have doleful faces around me. Above all, I must keep the truth from him. I know that I have the strength to do it. I am full of youth and spirit, and can die standing. For myself, I have no regrets. I am dying as I wished to die, still young and beautiful, in the perfection of my womanhood. As for him, I can see very well now that I should have made his life miserable. Passion has me in its grips, like a struggling fawn, impatient of the toils. My groundless jealousy has already wounded him sorely. When the day came that my suspicions met only indifference, which in the long run is the rightful meed of all jealousy, well, that would have been my death. I have had my share of life. There are people whose names on the muster roll of the world show 60 years of service, and yet in all that time they have not had 2 years of real life, whilst my record of 30 is doubled by the intensity of my love. Thus for him, as well as for me, the close is a happy one. But between us, dear Renee, it is different. You lose a loving sister, and that is a loss which nothing can repair. You alone here have the right to mourn my death." After a long pause, during which I could only see her through a mist of tears, she continued, "The moral of my death is a cruel one. My dear doctor in petticoats was right. Marriage cannot rest upon passion as its foundation, nor even upon love. How fine and noble is your life! Keeping always to the one safe road, you give your husband an ever-growing affection, while the passionate eagerness with which I threw myself into wedded life was bound in nature to diminish. Twice have I gone astray, and twice has death stretched forth his bony hand to strike my happiness. The first time he robbed me of the noblest and most devoted of men. Now it is my turn. The grinning monster tears me from the arms of my poet husband, with all his beauty and his grace. Yet I would not complain. Have I not known in turn 2 men, each the very pattern of nobility, one in mind, the other in outward form? In Philippe the soul dominated and transformed the body. In Gaston one could not say which was supreme, heart, mind, or grace of form. I die adored. What more could I wish for? Time, perhaps, in which to draw near the God of whom I may have too little thought. My spirit will take its flight towards him, full of love, and with the prayer that some day, in the world above, he will unite me once more to the 2 who made a heaven of my life below. Without them, paradise would be a desert to me. To others, my example would be fatal, for mine was no common lot. To meet a Philippe or a Gaston is more than mortals can expect, and therefore the doctrine of society in regard to marriage accords with the natural law. Woman is weak, and in marrying she ought to make an entire sacrifice of her will to the man who, in return, should lay his selfishness at her feet. The stir which women of late years have created by their whining and insubordination is ridiculous, and only shows how well we deserve the epithet of children bestowed by philosophers on our sex. She continued talking thus in the gentle voice you know so well, uttering the gravest truths in the prettiest manner, until Gaston entered, bringing with him his sister-in-law, the 2 children, and the English nurse, whom, at Louise's request, he had been to fetch from Paris. "Here are the pretty instruments of my torture," she said, as her nephews approached. Was not the mistake excusable? What a wonderful likeness to their uncle! She was most friendly to Madame Gaston the elder, and begged that she would look upon the chalet as her home. In short, she played the hostess to her in her best de Chaulieu manner, in which no one can rival her. I wrote at once to the Duc and Duchess de Chaulieu, the Duc de Rhetore, and the Duc de Lenoncourt-Givry, as well as to Madeleine. It was time. Next day Louise, worn out with so much exertion, was unable to go out. Indeed, she only got up for dinner. In the course of the evening, Madeleine de Lenoncourt, her 2 brothers, and her mother arrived. The coolness which Louise's second marriage had caused between herself and her family disappeared. Every day since that evening, Louise's father and both her brothers have ridden over in the morning, and the 2 duchesses spend all their evenings at the chalet. Death unites as well as separates. It silences all paltry feeling. Louise is perfection in her charm, her grace, her good sense, her wit, and her tenderness. She has retained to the last that perfect tact for which she has been so famous, and she lavishes on us the treasures of her brilliant mind, which made her one of the queens of Paris. "I should like to look well even in my coffin," she said with her matchless smile, as she lay down on the bed where she was to linger for a fortnight. Her room has nothing of the sick chamber in it. Medicines, ointments, the whole apparatus of nursing is carefully concealed. "Is not my deathbed pretty?" she said to the Sèvres priest who came to confess her. We gloated over her like misers. All this anxiety, and the terrible truths which dawned on him, have prepared Gaston for the worst. He is full of courage, but the blow has gone home. It would not surprise me to see him follow his wife in the natural course. Yesterday, as we were walking round the lake, he said to me, "I must be a father to those 2 children," and he pointed to his sister-in-law, who was taking the boys for a walk. "But though I shall do nothing to hasten my end, I want your promise that you will be a second mother to them, and will persuade your husband to accept the office of guardian, which I shall depute to him in conjunction with my sister-in-law." He said this quite simply, like a man who knows he is not long for this world. He has smiles on his face to meet Louise's, and it is only I whom he does not deceive. He is a mate for her in her courage. Louise has expressed a wish to see her godson, but I am not sorry he should be in Provence. She might want to remember him generously, and I should be in a great difficulty. Good-bye, my love. August 25th, her birthday. Yesterday evening Louise was delirious for a short time, but her delirium was the prettiest babbling, which shows that even the madness of gifted people is not that of fools or nobodies. In a mere thread of a voice she sang some Italian airs from I Puritani, La Sonnambula Moise, while we stood around the bed in silence. Not one of us, not even the Duc de Rhetore, had dry eyes, so clear was it to us all that her soul was in this fashion passing from us. She could no longer see us, yet she was there still in the charm of the faint melody, with its sweetness not of this earth. During the night the death agony began. It is now 7 in the morning, and I have just myself raised her from bed. Some flicker of strength revived. She wished to sit by her window, and asked for Gaston's hand. And then, my love, the sweetest spirit whom we shall ever see on this earth departed, leaving us the empty shell. The last sacrament had been administered the evening before, unknown to Gaston, who was taking a snatch of sleep during this agonizing ceremony, and after she was removed to the window, she asked me to read to her the De Profundis in French, while she was thus face to face with a lovely scene, which was her handiwork. She repeated the words after me to herself, and pressed the hands of her husband, who knelt on the other side of her chair. August 26th. My heart is broken. I have just seen her in her winding sheet. Her face is quite pale now with purple shadows. Oh, I want my children. My children. Bring me my children. The end. End of letter 57, and end of Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, October 2006. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 5. René de Maucombe to Louise de Chaulieu. October. How deeply your letter moved me, above all when I compare our widely different destinies. How brilliant is the world you are entering, how peaceful the retreat where I shall end my modest career. In the castle of Maucombe, which is so well known to you by description that I shall say no more of it, I found my room almost exactly as I left it, only now I can enjoy the splendid view it gives of the Gemenos Valley, which my childish eyes used to see without comprehending. A fortnight after my arrival, my father and mother took me, along with my two brothers, to dine with one of our neighbors, Monsieur de l'Estorade, an old gentleman of good family, who has made himself rich after the provincial fashion by scraping and paring. Monsieur de l'Estorade was unable to save his only son from the clutches of Bonaparte. After successfully eluding the conscription, he was forced to send him to the army in 1813 to join the Emperor's bodyguard. After Leipzig, no more was heard of him. Monsieur de Montrevaux, whom the father interviewed in 1814, declared that he had seen him taken by the Russians. Madame de l'Estorade died of grief whilst a vain search was being made in Russia. The Baron, a very pious old man, practiced that fine theological virtue which we used to cultivate at Blois, hope. Hope made him see his son in his dreams. He hoarded his income for him, and guarded carefully the portion of inheritance which fell to him from the family of the late Madame de l'Estorade, no one venturing to ridicule the old man. At last it dawned upon me that the unexpected return of this son was the cause of my own. Who could have imagined, whilst fancy was leading us a giddy dance, that my destined husband was slowly travelling on foot through Russia, Poland, and Germany? His bad luck only forsook him at Berlin, where the French minister helped his return to his native country. Monsieur de l'Estorade, the father, who is a small landed proprietor in Provence, with an income of about 10,000 livres, has not sufficient European fame to interest the world in the wandering knight de l'Estorade, whose name smacks of his adventures. The accumulated income of 12,000 livres from the property of Madame de l'Estorade, with the addition of the father's savings, provides the poor guard of honor with something like 250,000 livres, not counting house and lands, quite a considerable fortune in Provence. His worthy father had bought, on the very eve of the Chevalier's return, a fine but badly managed estate, where he designs to plant 10,000 mulberry trees, raised in his nursery, with a special view to this acquisition. The Baron, having found his long-lost son, has now but one thought, to marry him, and marry him to a girl of good family. My father and mother entered into their neighbour's idea with an eye to my interests, so soon as they discovered that René de Maucombe would be acceptable without a dowry, and that the money the said Renee ought to inherit from her parents would be duly acknowledged as hers in the contract. In a similar way, my younger brother, Jean de Maucombe, as soon as he came of age, signed a document stating that he had received from his parents an advance upon the estate equal in amount to 1/3 of the whole. This is the device by which the nobles of Provence elude the infamous civil code of M. de Bonaparte, a code which will drive as many girls of good family into convents as it will find husbands for. The French nobility, from the little I have been able to gather, seem to be divided on these matters. The dinner, darling, was a first meeting between your sweetheart and the exile. The Comte de Maucombe's servants donned their old lace liveries and hats, the coachman his great top boots. We sat 5 in the antiquated carriage, and arrived in state about 2 o'clock. The dinner was for 3, at the Grange, which is the dwelling of the Baron de l'Estorade. My father-in-law to be has, you see, no castle, only a simple country house, standing beneath one of our hills, at the entrance of that noble valley, the pride of which is undoubtedly the castle of Maucombe. The building is quite unpretentious. 4 pebble walls covered with a yellowish wash, and roofed with hollow tiles of a good red, constitute the grange. The rafters bend under the weight of this brick kiln. The windows, inserted casually, without any attempt at symmetry, have enormous shutters painted yellow. The garden in which it stands is a Provençal garden, enclosed by low walls, built of big round pebbles set in layers, alternately sloping or upright, according to the artistic taste of the mason, which finds here its only outlet. The mud in which they are set is falling away in places. Thanks to an iron railing at the entrance facing the road, this simple farm has a certain air of being a country seat. The railing, long sought with tears, is so emaciated that it recalled Sister Angelique to me. A flight of stone steps leads to the door, which is protected by a penthouse roof, such as no peasant on the Loire would tolerate for his coquettish white stone house, with its blue roof glittering in the sun. The garden and surrounding walks are horribly dusty, and the trees seem burnt up. It is easy to see that for years the Baron's life has been a mere rising up and going to bed again, day after day, without a thought, beyond that, of piling up coppers. He eats the same food as his 2 servants, a Provençal lad, and the old woman who used to wait on his wife. The rooms are scantily furnished. Nevertheless, the house of l'Estorade had done its best. The cupboards had been ransacked, and its last man beaten up for the dinner, which was served to us on old silver dishes, blackened and battered. The exile, my darling pet, is like the railing, emaciated. He is pale and silent, and bears traces of suffering. At 37 he might be 50. The once beautiful ebon locks of youth are streaked with white like a lark's wing. His fine blue eyes are cavernous. He is a little deaf, which suggests the night of the sorrowful countenance. Spite of all this, I have graciously consented to become Madame de l'Estorade, and to receive a dowry of 250,000 livres, but only on the express condition of being allowed to work my will upon the Grange and make a park there. I have demanded from my father in set terms a grant of water, which can be brought thither from Maucombe. In a month I shall be Madame de l'Estorade. For, dear, I have made a good impression. After the snows of Siberia, a man is ready enough to see merit in those black eyes, which, according to you, used to ripen fruit with a look. Louis de l'Estorade seems well content to marry the fair Renee de Maucombe. Such is your friend's splendid title. Whilst you are preparing to reap the joys of that many-sided existence which awaits a young lady of the Chaulieu family, and to queen it in Paris, your poor little sweetheart Renee, that child of the desert, has fallen from the empyrean, whither together we had soared, into the vulgar realities of a life as homely as a daisy's. I have vowed to myself to comfort this young man, who has never known youth, but passed straight from his mother's arms to the embrace of war, and from the joys of his country home to the frosts and forced labour of Siberia. Humble country pleasures will enliven the monotony of my future. It shall be my ambition to enlarge the oasis round my house, and to give it the lordly shade of fine trees. My turf, though Provençal, shall be always green. I shall carry my park up the hillside, and plant on the highest point some pretty kiosk, whence, perhaps, my eyes may catch the shimmer of the Mediterranean. Orange and lemon trees, and all choicest things that grow, shall embellish my retreat. And there will I be a mother among my children. The poetry of nature, which nothing can destroy, shall hedge us round, and standing loyally at the post of duty, we need fear no danger. My religious feelings are shared by my father and by the Chevalier. Ah, darling, my life unrolls itself before my eyes like one of the great highways of France, level and easy, shaded with evergreen trees. This century will not see another Bonaparte, and my children, if I have any, will not be rent from me. They will be mine to train and make men of, the joy of my life. If you also are true to your destiny, you who ought to find your mate amongst the great ones of the earth, the children of your Renée will not lack a zealous protectress. Farewell, then, for me at least, to the romances and thrilling adventures in which we used ourselves to play the part of heroine. The whole story of my life lies before me now. Its great crises will be the teething and nutrition of the young masters de l'Estorade, and the mischief they do to my shrubs and me. To embroider their caps, to be loved and admired by a sickly man at the mouth of the Gemenos valley, these are my pleasures. Perhaps some day the country dame may go and spend a winter in Marseille, but danger does not haunt the purlieus of a narrow provincial stage. There will be nothing to fear, not even an admiration such as could only make a woman proud. We shall take a great deal of interest in the silkworms for whose benefit our mulberry leaves will be sold. We shall know the strange vicissitudes of life in Provence, and the storms that may attack even a peaceful household. Quarrels will be impossible, for Monsieur de l'Estorade has formally announced that he will leave the reins in his wife's hands, and as I shall do nothing to remind him of his wise resolve, it is likely he may persevere in it. You, my dear Louise, will supply the romance of my life. So you must narrate to me, in full, all your adventures, describe your balls and parties, tell me what you wear, what flowers crown your lovely golden locks, and what are the words and manners of the men you meet. Your other self will be always there, listening, dancing, feeling her fingertips pressed, with you. If only I could have some fun in Paris now and then, while you played the house mother at La Crampade. Such is the name of our grange. Poor Monsieur de l'Estorade, who fancies he is marrying one woman, will he find out there are two? I am writing nonsense now, and as henceforth I can only be foolish by proxy, I had better stop. One kiss, then, on each cheek. My lips are still virginal. He has only dared to take my hand. Oh, our deference and propriety are quite disquieting, I assure you. There, I am off again. Good-bye, dear. P.S. I have just opened your third letter. My dear, I have about 1,000 livres to dispose of. Spend them for me on pretty things, such as we can't find here, nor even at Marseille. While speeding on your own business, give a thought to the recluse of La Crampade. Remember that on neither side have the heads of the family any people of taste in Paris to make their purchases. I shall reply to your letter later. End of letter 5.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how to volunteer, please contact LibriVox.org. Recording by Peter Yearsley. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 6. Don Felipe Henares to Don Ferdinand. Paris, September. The address of this letter, my brother, will show you that the head of your house is out of reach of danger. If the massacre of our ancestors in the court of lions made Spaniards and Christians of us against our will, it left us a legacy of Arab cunning, and it may be that I owe my safety to the blood of the Abencerraguez still flowing in my veins. Fear made Ferdinand's acting so good that Valdez actually believed in his protestations. But for me, the poor admiral would have been done for. Nothing, it seems, will teach the Liberals what a king is. This particular Bourbon has been long known to me, and the more his Majesty assured me of his protection, the stronger grew my suspicions. A true Spaniard has no need to repeat a promise. A flow of words is a sure sign of duplicity. Valdez took ship on an English vessel. For myself, no sooner did I see the cause of my beloved Spain wrecked in Andalusia than I wrote to the steward of my Sardinian estate to make arrangements for my escape. Some hardy coral fishers were dispatched to wait for me at a point on the coast, and when Ferdinand urged the French to secure my person, I was already in my barony of Macumer, amidst brigands who defy all law and all avengers. The last Hispano-Moorish family of Granada has found once more the shelter of an African desert, and even a Saracen horse, in an estate which comes to it from Saracens. How the eyes of these brigands, who but yesterday had dreaded my authority, sparkled with savage joy and pride when they found they were protecting against the King of Spain's vendetta the Duke de Soria, their master, and the Henares, the first who had come to visit them since the time when the island belonged to the Moors. More than a score of rifles were ready to point at Ferdinand of Bourbon, son of a race which was still unknown when the Abencerrages arrived as conquerors on the banks of the Loire. My idea had been to live on the income of these huge estates, which unfortunately we have so greatly neglected. But my stay there convinced me that this was impossible, and that Quevedo's reports were only too correct. The poor man had 22 lives at my disposal, and not a single real, prairies of 20,000 acres, and not a house, virgin forests, and not a stick of furniture. 1,000,000 piastres, and a resident master for half a century would be necessary to make these magnificent lands pay. I must see to this. The conquered have time during their flight to ponder their own case, and that of their vanquished party. At the spectacle of my noble country, a corpse for monks to pray on, my eyes filled with tears. I read in it the presage of Spain's gloomy future. At Marseilles I heard of Riego's end. Painfully did it come home to me that my life also would be a martyrdom, but a martyrdom protracted and unnoticed. Is existence worthy the name when a man can no longer die for his country or live for a woman? To love, to conquer, this twofold form of the same thought is the law graven on our sabres, emblazoned on the vaulted roofs of our palaces, ceaselessly whispered by the water which rises and falls in our marble fountains. But in vain does it nerve my heart. The sabre is broken, the palace in ashes, the living spring sucked up by the barren sand. Here, then, is my last will and testament. Don Ferdinand, you will understand now why I put a check upon your ardour and ordered you to remain faithful to the Rey Neto. As your brother and friend, I implore you to obey me. As your master, I command. You will go to the king, and will ask from him the grant of my dignities and property, my office and titles. He will perhaps hesitate, and may treat you to some regal scowls. But you must tell him that you are loved by Marie Heredia, and that Marie can marry none but Duke de Soria. This will make the king radiant. It is the immense fortune of the Heredia family which alone has stood between him and the accomplishment of my ruin. Your proposal will seem to him, therefore, to deprive me of a last resource, and he will gladly hand over to you my spoils. You will then marry Marie. The secret of the mutual love against which you fought was no secret to me, and I have prepared the old count to see you take my place. Marie and I were merely doing what was expected of us in our position, and carrying out the wishes of our fathers. Everything else is in your favour. You are beautiful as a child of love, and are possessed of Marie's heart. I am an ill-favoured Spanish grandee, for whom she feels an aversion to which she will not confess. Some slight reluctance there may be on the part of the noble Spanish girl on account of my misfortunes, but this you will soon overcome. Duke de Soria, your predecessor, would neither cost you a regret nor rob you of a maravedi. My mother's diamonds, which will suffice to make me independent, I will keep, because the gap caused by them in the family estate can be filled by Marie's jewels. You can send them, therefore, by my nurse, old Urraca, the only one of my servants whom I wish to retain. No one can prepare my chocolate as she does. During our brief revolution, my life of unremitting toil was reduced to the barest necessaries, and these my salary was sufficient to provide. You will therefore find the income of the last 2 years in the hands of your steward. This sum is mine, but a Duke de Soria cannot marry without a large expenditure of money. Therefore we will divide it. You will not refuse this wedding present from your brigand brother. Besides, I mean to have it so. The baronry of Macumer, not being Spanish territory, remains to me. Thus I still have a country and a name, should I wish to take up a position in the world again. Thank heaven, this finishes our business, and the house of Soria is saved. At the very moment when I drop into simple Baron de Macumer, the French cannon announce the arrival of the Duc d'Angoulême. You will understand why I break off. October. When I arrived here, I had not 10 doubloons in my pocket. He would indeed be a poor sort of leader, who, in the midst of calamities he has not been able to avert, has found means to feather his own nest. For the vanquished Moor there remains a horse and the desert. For the Christian foil of his hopes, the cloister and a few gold pieces. But my present resignation is mere weariness. I am not yet so near the monastery as to have abandoned all thoughts of life. Osalga has given me several letters of introduction to meet all emergencies, among these one to a bookseller, who takes with our fellow countrymen the place which Galignani holds with the English in Paris. This man has found 8 pupils for me at 3 francs a lesson. I go to my pupils every alternate day, so that I have 4 lessons a day and earn 12 francs, which is more than I require. When Urraca comes, I shall make some Spanish exile happy by passing on to him my connection. I lodge in the Rue Hillerin Bertin with a poor widow who takes boarders. My room faces south and looks out on a little garden. It is perfectly quiet. I have green trees to look upon, and spend the sum of 1 piastre a day. I am amazed at the amount of calm, pure pleasure which I enjoy in this life, after the fashion of Dionysius at Corinth. From sunrise until 10 o'clock I smoke and take my chocolate, sitting at my window and contemplating 2 Spanish plants, a broom which rises out of a clump of jessamine, gold on a white ground, colours which must send a thrill through any scion of the Moors. At 10 o'clock I start for my lessons, which last till 4, when I return for dinner. Afterwards I read and smoke till I go to bed. I can put up for a long time with a life like this, compounded of work and meditation, of solitude and society. Be happy, therefore, Fernand. My abdication has brought no afterthoughts. I have no regrets, like Charles V, no longing to try the game again, like Napoleon. 5 days and nights have passed since I wrote my will. To my mind, they might have been 5 centuries. Honour, titles, wealth are for me as though they had never existed. Now that the conventional barrier of respect which hedged me round has fallen, I can open my heart to you, dear boy. Though cased in the armour of gravity, this heart is full of tenderness and devotion, which have found no object, and which no woman has divined, not even she, who from her cradle has been my destined bride. In this lies the secret of my political enthusiasm. Spain has taken the place of a mistress, and received the homage of my heart, and now Spain too is gone. Beggared of all, I can gaze upon the ruin of what once was me, and speculate over the mysteries of my being. Why did life animate this carcass, and when will it depart? Why has that race, pre-eminent in chivalry, breathed all its primitive virtues, its tropical love, its fiery poetry, into this its last offshoot, if the seed was never to burst its rugged shell, if no stem was to spring forth, no radiant flower scatter aloft its eastern perfumes? Of what crime have I been guilty before my birth, that I can inspire no love? Did fate from my very infancy decree that I should be stranded, a useless hulk, on some barren shore? I find in my soul the image of the deserts where my fathers ranged, illumined by a scorching sun which shrivels up all life. Proud remnant of a fallen race, vain force, love run to waste, an old man in the prime of youth. Here, better than elsewhere, shall I await the last grace of death. Alas, under this murky sky no spark will kindle these ashes again to flame. Thus my last words may be those of Christ. My God, thou hast forsaken me! Cry of agony and terror, to the core of which no mortal has ventured yet to penetrate. You can realize now, Ferdinand, what a joy it is to me to live afresh in you and Marie. I shall watch you henceforth with the pride of a creator satisfied in his work. Love each other well, and go on loving if you would not give me pain. Any discord between you would hurt me more than it would yourselves. Our mother had a presentiment that events would one day serve her wishes. It may be that the longing of a mother constitutes a pact between herself and God. Was she not, moreover, one of those mysterious beings who can hold converse with heaven, and bring back thence a vision of the future? How often have I not read in the lines of her forehead that she was coveting for Ferdinand the honours and the wealth of Felipe? When I said so to her, she would reply with tears, laying bare the wounds of a heart, which of right was the undivided property of both her sons, but which an irresistible passion gave to you alone. Her spirit, therefore, will hover joyfully above your heads as you bow them at the altar. My mother, have you not a caress for your Felipe, now that he has yielded to your favourite, even the girl whom you regretfully thrust into his arms? What I have done is pleasing to our womankind, to the dead, and to the king. It is the will of God. Make no difficulty then, Ferdinand. Obey and be silent. P.S. Tell Urraca to be sure and call me nothing but Monsieur Nareth. Don't say a word about me to Marie. You must be the one living soul to know the secrets of the last Christianized Moor, in whose veins runs the blood of a great family, which took its rise in the desert and is now about to die out in the person of a solitary exile. Farewell. End of Letter 6.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 7. Louise de Chaulieu to Renée de Maucombe. What? To be married so soon! But this is unheard of. At the end of a month you become engaged to a man who is a stranger to you, and about whom you know nothing. The man may be deaf. There are so many kinds of deafness. He may be sickly, tiresome, insufferable. Don't you see, Renée, what they want with you? You are needful for carrying on the glorious stock of the l'Estorades. That is all. You will be buried in the provinces. Are these the promises we made to each other? Were I you, I would sooner set off to the Hieres Islands in a caique, on the chance of being captured by an Algerian corsair and sold to the Grand Turk. Then I should be a sultana some day, and wouldn't I make a stir in the harem while I was young, yes, and afterwards too. You are leaving one convent to enter another. I know you. You are a coward, and you will submit to the yoke of family life with a lamb-like docility. But I am here to direct you. You must come to Paris. There we shall drive the men wild and hold a court like queens. Your husband, sweetheart, in 3 years from now may become a member of the Chamber. I know all about members now, and I will explain it to you. You will work that machine very well. You can live in Paris, and become there what my mother calls a woman of fashion. Oh, you needn't suppose I will leave you in your grange. Monday. For a whole fortnight now, my dear, I have been living the life of society, one evening at the Italians, another at the Grand Opera, and always a ball afterwards. Ah, society is a witching world. The music of the opera enchants me, and whilst my soul is plunged in divine pleasure, I am the centre of admiration and the focus of all the opera glasses. But a single glance will make the boldest youth drop his eyes. I have seen some charming young men there. All the same, I don't care for any of them. Not one has roused in me the emotion which I feel when I listen to Garcia in his splendid duet with Pellegrini in Otello. Heavens, how jealous Rossini must have been to express jealousy so well! What a cry in Il mio cor si divide! I'm speaking Greek to you, for you have never heard Garcia, but then you know how jealous I am. What a wretched dramatist Shakespeare is! Othello is in love with glory. He wins battles, he gives orders, he struts about, and is all over the place while Desdemona sits at home, and Desdemona, who sees herself neglected for the silly fuss of public life, is quite meek all the time. Such a sheep deserves to be slaughtered. Let the man whom I deign to love beware how he thinks of anything but loving me. For my part, I like those long trials of the old-fashioned chivalry. That lout of a young lord who took offence because his sovereign lady sent him down among the lions to fetch her glove was, in my opinion, very impertinent, and a fool too. Doubtless the lady had in reserve for him some exquisite flower of love, which he lost, as he well deserved, the puppy. But here I am running on as though I had not a great piece of news to tell you. My father is certainly going to represent our master the king at Madrid. I say our master, for I shall make part of the embassy. My mother wishes to remain here, and my father will take me, so as to have some woman with him. My dear, this seems to you no doubt very simple, but there are horrors behind it all the same. In a fortnight I have probed the secrets of the house. My mother would accompany my father to Madrid if he would take Monsieur de Canalis as a secretary to the embassy. But the king appoints the secretaries. The Duke dare neither annoy the king, who hates to be opposed, nor vex my mother, and the wily diplomat believes he has cut the knot by leaving the Duchess here. Monsieur de Canalis, who is the great poet of the day, is the young man who cultivates my mother's society, and who no doubt studies diplomacy with her from 3 o'clock to 5. Diplomacy must be a fine subject, for he is as regular as a gambler on the Stock Exchange. The Duc de Rhetore, our elder brother, solemn, cold, and whimsical, would be extinguished by his father at Madrid, therefore he remains in Paris. Miss Griffith has found out also that Alphonse is in love with a ballet girl at the opera. How is it possible to fall in love with legs and pirouettes? We have noticed that my brother comes to the theatre only when Tullia dances there. He applauds the steps of this creature, and then goes out. 2 ballet girls in a family are, I fancy, more destructive than the plague. My second brother is with his regiment, and I have not yet seen him. Thus it comes about that I have to act as the Antigone of His Majesty's ambassador. Perhaps I may get married in Spain, and perhaps my father's idea is a marriage there without dowry, after the pattern of yours with this broken-down guard of honor. My father asked if I would go with him, and offered me the use of his Spanish master. Spain, the country for castles in the air, I cried. Perhaps you hope that it may mean marriages for me. For sole reply he honored me with a meaning look. For some days he has amused himself with teasing me at lunch. He watches me, and I dissemble. In this way I have played with him cruelly as father and ambassador in petto. Hadn't he taken me for a fool? He asked me what I thought of this and that young man, and of some girls whom I had met in several houses. I replied with quite inane remarks on the colour of their hair, their faces, and the difference in their figures. My father seemed disappointed at my crassness, and inwardly blamed himself for having asked me. Still, father, I added, don't suppose I am saying what I really think. Mother made me afraid the other day that I had spoken more frankly than I ought of my impressions. With your family you can speak quite freely, my mother replied. Very well, then, I went on. The young men I have met so far strike me as too self-centered to excite interest in others. They are much more taken up with themselves than with their company. They can't be accused of lack of candor at any rate. They put on a certain expression to talk to us and drop it again in a moment, apparently satisfied that we don't use our eyes. The man as he converses is the lover. Silent, he is the husband. The girls again are so artificial that it is impossible to know what they really are, except from the way they dance. Their figures and movements alone are not a sham. But what has alarmed me most in this fashionable society is its brutality. The little incidents which take place when supper is announced give one some idea, to compare small things with great, of what a popular rising might be. Courtesy is only a thin veneer on the general selfishness. I imagined society very different. Women count for little in it. That may perhaps be a survival of Bonapartist ideas. Armand is coming on extraordinarily, said my mother. Mother, did you think I should never get beyond asking to see Madame de Stael? My father smiled and rose from the table. Saturday. My dear, I have left one thing out. Here is the tidbit I have reserved for you. The love which we pictured must be extremely well hidden. I have seen not a trace of it. True, I have caught in drawing-rooms now and again a quick exchange of glances, but how colourless it all is! Love, as we imagined it, a world of wonders, of glorious dreams, of charming realities, of sorrows that waken sympathy, and smiles that make sunshine, does not exist. The bewitching words, the constant interchange of happiness, the misery of absence, the flood of joy at the presence of the beloved one, where are they? What soil produces these radiant flowers of the soul? Which is wrong, we or the world? I have already seen hundreds of men, young and middle-aged. Not one has stirred the least feeling in me. No proof of admiration and devotion on their part, not even a sword drawn in my behalf, would have moved me. Love, dear, is the product of such rare conditions that it is quite possible to live a lifetime without coming across the being on whom nature has bestowed the power of making one's happiness. The thought is enough to make one shudder, for if this being is found too late, what then? For some days I have begun to tremble when I think of the destiny of women, and to understand why so many wear a sad face beneath the flush brought by the unnatural excitement of social dissipation. Marriage is a mere matter of chance. Look at yours. A storm of wild thoughts has passed over my mind. To be loved every day the same, yet with a difference, to be loved as much after 10 years of happiness as on the first day, such a love demands years. The lover must be allowed to languish, curiosity must be piqued and satisfied, feeling roused and responded to. Is there, then, a law for the inner fruits of the heart, as there is for the visible fruits of nature? Can joy be made lasting? In what proportion should love mingle tears with pleasures? The cold policy of the funereal, monotonous, persistent routine of the convent seemed to me at these moments the only real life, while the wealth, the splendor, the tears, the delights, the triumph, the joy, the satisfaction of a love equal, shared, and sanctioned, appeared a mere idle vision. I see no room in this city for the gentle ways of love, for precious walks in shady alleys, the full moon sparkling on the water, while the suppliant pleads in vain. Rich, young, and beautiful, I have only to love, and love would become my sole occupation, my life. Yet in the 3 months during which I have come and gone, eager and curious, nothing has appealed to me in the bright, covetous, keen eyes around me. No voice has thrilled me, no glance has made the world seem brighter. Music alone has filled my soul, music alone has at all taken the place of our friendship. Sometimes at night I will linger for an hour by my window, gazing into the garden, summoning the future, with all it brings, out of the mystery which shrouds it. There are days, too, when, having started for a drive, I get out and walk in the Champs-Élysées, and picture to myself that the man who is to waken my slumbering soul is at hand, that he will follow and look at me. Then I meet only mountebanks, vendors of gingerbread, jugglers, passers-by hurrying to their business, or lovers who try to escape notice. These I am tempted to stop, asking them, "You, who are happy, tell me what is love?" But the impulse is repressed, and I return to my carriage, swearing to die an old maid. Love is undoubtedly an incarnation, and how many conditions are needful before it can take place? We are not certain of never quarreling with ourselves, how much less so when there are two? This is a problem which God alone can solve. I begin to think that I shall return to the convent. If I remain in society, I shall do things which will look like follies, for I cannot possibly reconcile myself to what I see. I am perpetually wounded either in my sense of delicacy, my inner principles, or my secret thoughts. Ah, my mother is the happiest of women, adored as she is by Canalis, her great little man. My love, do you know I am seized sometimes with a horrible craving to know what goes on between my mother and that young man? Griffith tells me she has gone through all these moods. She has longed to fly at women whose happiness was written in their face. She has blackened their character, torn them to pieces. According to her, virtue consists in burying all these savage instincts in one's innermost heart. But what then of the heart? It becomes the sink of all that is worst in us. It is very humiliating that no adorer has yet turned up for me. I am a marriageable girl, but I have brothers, a family, relations, who are sensitive on the point of honor. Ah, if that is what keeps men back, they are poltroons. The part of Chimène in The Cid, and that of the Cid delight me. What a marvelous play! Well, good-bye. End of Letter 7. Read by Kara Schallenberg, www.kray.org, on November 19th, 2006, in Oceanside, California. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Schallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 8. The Same to the Same. January. Our master is a poor refugee, forced to keep in hiding on account of the part he played in the revolution which the Duc d'Angoulême has just quelled. A triumph to which we owe some splendid fates. Though a Liberal and doubtless a man of the people, he has awakened my interest. I fancy that he must have been condemned to death. I make him talk for the purpose of getting at his secret, but he is of a truly Castilian taciturnity, proud as though he were Gonzalvo di Cordova, and nevertheless angelic in his patience and gentleness. His pride is not irritable like Miss Griffith's; it belongs to his inner nature. He forces us to civility because his own manners are so perfect, and holds us at a distance by the respect he shows us. My father declares that there is a great deal of the nobleman in Señor Henarez, whom, among ourselves, he calls in fun Don Henarez. A few days ago I took the liberty of addressing him thus. He raised his eyes, which are generally bent on the ground, and flashed a look from them that quite abashed me. My dear, he certainly has the most beautiful eyes imaginable. I asked him if I had offended him in any way, and he said to me in his grand rolling Spanish, "I am here only to teach you Spanish." I blushed and felt quite snubbed. I was on the point of making some pert answer, when I remembered what our dear Mother in God used to say to us, and I replied instead, "It would be a kindness to tell me if you have anything to complain of." A tremor passed through him, the blood rose in his olive cheeks. He replied in a voice of some emotion, "Religion must have taught you, better than I can, to respect the unhappy. Had I been a Don in Spain and lost everything in the triumph of Ferdinand VII, your witticism would be unkind. But if I am only a poor teacher of languages, is it not a heartless satire? Neither is worthy of a young lady of rank." I took his hand, saying, "In the name of religion also, I beg you to pardon me." He bowed, opened my Don Quixote, and sat down. This little incident disturbed me more than the harvest of compliments, gazing, and pretty speeches on my most successful evening. During the lesson I watched him attentively, which I could do the more safely as he never looks at me. As the result of my observations, I made out that the tutor, whom we took to be 40, is a young man, some years under 30. My governess, to whom I had handed him over, remarked on the beauty of his black hair and of his pearly teeth. As to his eyes, they are velvet and fire, but he is plain and insignificant. Though the Spaniards have been described as not a cleanly people, this man is most carefully got up, and his hands are whiter than his face. He stoops a little, and has an extremely large, oddly shaped head. His ugliness, which, however, has a dash of piquancy, is aggravated by smallpox marks, which seam his face. His forehead is very prominent, and the shaggy eyebrows meet, giving a repellent air of harshness. There is a frowning, plaintive look on his face, reminding one of a sickly child, which owes its life to superhuman care, as Sister Marta did. As my father observed, his features are a shrunken reproduction of those of Cardinal Ximenes. The natural dignity of our tutor's manners seems to disconcert the dear Duke, who doesn't like him, and is never at ease with him. He can't bear to come in contact with superiority of any kind. As soon as my father knows enough Spanish, we start for Madrid. When Henarez returned, 2 days after the reproof he had given me, I remarked, by way of showing my gratitude, "I have no doubt that you left Spain in consequence of political events. If my father is sent there, as seems to be expected, we shall be in a position to help you, and might be able to obtain your pardon, in case you are under sentence." "It is impossible for any one to help me," he replied. "But," I said, "is that because you refuse to accept any help, or because the thing itself is impossible?" "Both," he said with a bow, and in a tone which forbade continuing the subject. My father's blood chafed in my veins. I was offended by this haughty demeanour, and promptly dropped Señor Henarez. "All the same, my dear, there is something fine in this rejection of any aid." He would not accept even our friendship, I reflected, whilst conjugating a verb. Suddenly I stopped short and told him what was in my mind, but in Spanish. Henarez replied very politely that equality of sentiment was necessary between friends, which did not exist in this case, and therefore it was useless to consider the question. "Do you mean equality in the amount of feeling on either side, or equality in rank?" I persisted, determined to shake him out of this provoking gravity. He raised once more those awe-inspiring eyes, and mine fell before them. Dear, this man is a hopeless enigma. He seemed to ask whether my words meant love, and the mixture of joy, pride, and agonized doubt in his glance went to my heart. It was plain that advances which would be taken for what they were worth in France might land me in difficulties with a Spaniard, and I drew back into my shell, feeling not a little foolish. The lesson over, he bowed, and his eyes were eloquent of the humble prayer, "Don't trifle with a poor wretch." This sudden contrast to his usual grave and dignified manner made a great impression on me. It seems horrible to think and to say, but I can't help believing that there are treasures of affection in that man. End of Letter 8. Read by Kara Schallenberg. www.kray.org. On November 19th, 2006, in Oceanside, California.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, October 2006. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 9. Madame de l'Estorade to Mademoiselle de Chaulieu, December. All is over, my dear child, and it is Madame de l'Estorade who writes to you. But between us there is no change. It is only a girl the less. Don't be troubled. I did not give my consent recklessly or without much thought. My life is henceforth mapped out for me, and the freedom from all uncertainty as to the road for me to follow suits my mind and disposition. A great moral power has stepped in, and once for all swept what we call chance out of my life. We have the property to develop, our home to beautify and adorn. For me there is also a household to direct and sweeten, and a husband to reconcile to life. In all probability, I shall have a family to look after, children to educate. What would you have? Everyday life cannot be cast in heroic mold. No doubt there seems, at any rate at first sight, no room left in this scheme of life for that longing after the infinite which expands the mind and soul. But what is there to prevent me from launching on that boundless sea our familiar craft? Nor must you suppose that the humble duties to which I dedicate my life give no scope for passion. To restore faith and happiness to an unfortunate, who has been the sport of adverse circumstances, is a noble work, and one which alone may suffice to relieve the monotony of my existence. I can see no opening left for suffering, and I see a great deal of good to be done. I need not hide from you that the love I have for Louis de l'Estorade is not of the kind which makes the heart throb at the sound of a step, and thrills us at the lightest tones of a voice, or the caress of a burning glance. But, on the other hand, there is nothing in him which offends me. What am I to do, you will ask, with that instinct for all which is great and noble, with those mental energies which have made the link between us, and which we still possess? I admit that this thought has troubled me. But are these faculties less ours because we keep them concealed, using them only in secret for the welfare of the family, as instruments to produce the happiness of those confided to our care, to whom we are bound to give ourselves without reserve? The time during which a woman can look for admiration is short; it will soon be past; and if my life has not been a great one, it will at least have been calm, tranquil, free from shocks. Nature has favored our sex in giving us a choice between love and motherhood. I have made mine. My children shall be my gods, and this spot of earth my Eldorado. I can say no more to-day. Thank you much for all the things you have sent me. Give a glance at my needs on the enclosed list. I am determined to live in an atmosphere of refinement and luxury, and to take from provincial life only what makes its charm. In solitude a woman can never be vulgarized; she remains herself. I count greatly on your kindness for keeping me up to the fashion. My father-in-law is so delighted that he can refuse me nothing, and turns his house upside down. We are getting workpeople from Paris and renovating everything. End of Letter 9.